Welcome to the inner arena where the weak crumble and the disciplined thrive under the weight of absolute chaos. In this first chapter, we dissect the architecture of emotional mastery, because your ability to remain a frozen lake in the middle of a burning forest is the only thing that separates the elite from the casualties of circumstance. Most individuals are mere passengers in their own minds, being driven by biological impulses that were designed for survival, but now serve only to sabotage their professional and personal dominance. When the stakes rise and the pressure mounts, a physiological cascade of cortisol and adrenaline floods your system, effectively hijacking your prefrontal cortex and paralyzing your capacity for rational thought. This is the moment of the great divide where the untrained mind dissolves into a frantic mess of reactive patterns, while the disciplined mind engages its internal dampening systems to maintain a clinical level of clarity. You must understand that an emotional reaction is essentially a surrender of your power to the external environment, which allows your competitors or your circumstances to dictate your next move. Mastery begins with the recognition that intensity is not your enemy, but a neutral energy that can either sharpen your focus or shatter your resolve, depending entirely on the mental framework you have constructed. We are here to dismantle the reflexive habits that lead to panic and replace them with a deliberate protocol of psychological stillness that ensures you are the most dangerous person in the room, because you are the one who is truly in control. The psychology of anger, fear, and panic is a biological trap designed to bypass your intellect in favor of raw instinct, which is why you must learn to see these emotions as data points rather than directives. Anger is often a defensive mask for perceived weakness or loss of control, while fear is the imagination being used against the self to create a future that has not yet occurred, and panic is the final collapse of the logical structures that should be holding your reality together. When you allow these forces to take over your mind, you are essentially operating on a primitive operating system that is incapable of navigating the complex nuances of high-level strategy or interpersonal conflict. Top performers do not lack these emotions, but they have developed a secondary observer within their consciousness that monitors the rise of these feelings without becoming consumed by them. Think of your mind as a high-performance engine that requires a constant flow of oxygen and precision cooling to prevent a catastrophic meltdown during a race. If you cannot regulate the heat generated by pressure, you will inevitably blow a gasket at the exact moment when you need maximum output to secure your victory. This chapter requires you to face the reality that your previous outbursts or moments of paralysis were not accidents, but failures in your mental architecture that we are now going to rebuild from the ground up with cold hard steel. You are learning to exist in the gap between a stimulus and your response, which is the only place where true freedom and tactical superiority can ever be found or maintained. To navigate the most intense scenarios, you must master the art of the tactical pause, which is a mental maneuver that creates a pocket of silence in the middle of an escalating storm. Most people believe they must act immediately when under pressure, but this is a fallacy that leads to unforced errors and the total erosion of your strategic positioning. The technique begins with an internal command to disengage from the sensory overload and redirect all of your cognitive resources toward a singular point of objective analysis. You must learn to strip away the narrative layers of the situation, such as who is to blame or what the consequences might be, and focus exclusively on the raw variables that you can actually influence in real time. Imagine you are in a boardroom negotiation that has turned hostile, or a critical operational failure where every second costs a fortune and your reputation is on the line. The natural urge is to shout or to retreat, but the disciplined operator does neither, because they are busy calculating the most efficient path through the wreckage. You are training yourself to breathe through the surge of panic until the physiological symptoms subside enough for your logic to reassert its dominance over the lizard brain. This is not about suppressing your emotions, but about delegating them to a secondary status where they can no longer interfere with the mission at hand. By practicing this mental reset in low-stakes environments, you build the neural pathways necessary to execute it flawlessly when the world is watching and the cost of failure is absolute. Real-world pressure is a laboratory for your mental discipline, and you must seek out these moments as opportunities to test the strength of your newly forged emotional armor. Consider the professional athlete who must perform a precision movement with millions of eyes upon them, or the surgeon who encounters a sudden complication that threatens a patient's life in an instant. These individuals do not succeed because they are fearless, but because they have rehearsed the mental navigation of disaster until it becomes a subconscious reflex. You must develop a series of internal triggers that alert you the moment your heart rate begins to climb or your vision starts to tunnel under the influence of stress. Once the trigger is activated, you deploy a pre-planned mental script that centers your focus on the process rather than the outcome, which effectively neuters the power of fear to distract you. You are learning to treat pressure as a privilege because it indicates that you are in a position of significance where your decisions actually matter on a grand scale. If you find yourself in a situation where everyone else is losing their heads, your calm becomes a gravitational force that pulls the situation back into order and gives you the ultimate leverage. You are the anchor in the storm, and while others are being swept away by their own internal turbulence, you are planting your feet and dictating the terms of the engagement. This level of control is not a gift, but a hard-won skill that requires you to intentionally expose yourself to discomfort until you become comfortable in the heat of the fire. As we conclude this initial phase of your training, you must commit to the relentless pursuit of self-awareness, because you cannot control what you do not acknowledge. Every time you feel the sting of an insult or the cold grip of anxiety, you have a choice to either be a victim of your biology or a master of your destiny. This chapter has provided the foundation for a life of mental dominance where your emotions serve your goals instead of dictating them through a lens of weakness. You are now equipped with the understanding that the mind is a battlefield, and the first territory you must conquer is the space between your ears. Carry this intensity into your daily life, and look for the small fires that you can practice extinguishing with the cold water of your logic and your breath. The transition from a reactive person to a proactive force of nature is a painful process of shedding old identities, but it is the only way to ensure that you win in every situation. Never allow the noise of the world to drown out the steady rhythm of your own disciplined thought process, because that is where your power resides. You are building a mental fortress that is impenetrable to the petty grievances and temporary panics that plague the masses of the uninitiated. This is the end of your old way of being and the beginning of your journey as a practitioner of absolute emotional control under the highest levels of pressure imaginable. You have been given the tools, and now you must have the courage to apply them when the stakes are at their highest and the margin for error is zero. The second phase of your mental conditioning begins with the total reclamation of your attention from a world designed to fragment it into useless shards of distraction. Modern environments are engineered psychological minefields constructed to exploit your biological craving for novelty and instant gratification at the expense of your long-term strategic goals. Every notification and every digital lure acts as a parasitic drain on your cognitive energy, effectively conditioning your brain to exist in a state of perpetual shallow stimulation. This constant bombardment has eroded the collective capacity for deep thought, leaving a power vacuum that only the truly disciplined can fill through rigorous self-regulation. You must realize that your focus is not just a mental state, but a finite currency that you are currently squandering on trivialities that offer zero return on investment. The brain is remarkably plastic, and it has been inadvertently rewired to seek out the quick hit of dopamine that comes from shifting tasks rather than the profound satisfaction of completion. To break this cycle of addiction, you must first acknowledge that your wandering mind is a symptom of a systemic failure in your mental environment, which we are now going to purge with clinical precision. We are here to strip away the clutter and the noise until only the sharp edge of your intent remains to cut through the resistance of the mundane world. You are learning that the ability to direct your consciousness toward a single point for an extended duration is the ultimate expression of power in an age of fragmented awareness. By choosing to ignore the siren calls of the digital landscape, you are making a radical declaration of sovereignty over your own intellect. This training requires you to view every distraction as a direct assault on your sovereignty and a threat to the mission that you must repel with lethal efficiency. Rewiring your thought patterns requires a systematic dismantling of the impulse to seek escape when a task becomes difficult or the initial excitement begins to fade into the grind of execution. Deep work is not a natural state for the modern mind because it demands a level of cognitive intensity that most people have been socialized to avoid at all costs. When you sit down to focus, your brain will initially protest by generating a series of urgent yet irrelevant thoughts designed to pull you back into the comfort of shallow distraction. You must learn to observe these impulses without acting on them, as if you were watching a storm from behind a thick pane of reinforced glass. This practice of non-reactive awareness is the cornerstone of unbreakable focus because it prevents your internal restlessness from dictating your external actions. You are training your neural pathways to prioritize the complex and the demanding over the easy and the entertaining, which effectively upgrades your mental operating system for high-level performance. Think of your focus as a high-powered laser that must be calibrated to a specific frequency to burn through the obstacles in your path. If the beam is scattered, it is nothing more than a dull glow that provides no warmth and no utility, but when it is concentrated, it becomes a tool of absolute precision. This process of recalibration is uncomfortable because it forces rewiring your thought patterns requires a systematic dismantling of the impulse to seek escape when a task becomes difficult or the initial excitement begins to fade into the grind of execution. Deep work is not a natural state for the modern mind because it demands a level of cognitive intensity that most people have been socialized to avoid at all costs. When you sit down to focus, your brain will initially protest by generating a series of to achieve a state of locked-in focus, you must implement a series of environmental and psychological barriers that make distraction physically and mentally impossible during your peak hours of operation. Shutting out the noise begins with a ruthless audit of your physical surroundings and the digital portals that allow the chaos of the world to infiltrate your workspace. You must create a sanctuary of silence where the only thing that exists is you and the objective at hand, which requires a level of environmental control that most people find extreme. However, the true battle is fought within the confines of your own mind, where you must develop the capacity to silence the internal chatter through sheer force of will. One effective technique is the implementation of a single task protocol where you treat the act of multitasking as a form of cognitive sabotage that degrades the quality of your output. When you allow your mind to jump between subjects, you are incurring a heavy switching cost that leaves you mentally depleted and strategically blind to the nuances of your work. Instead, you must anchor your attention to a singular goal and refuse to allow any secondary thought to take root until that goal has been achieved or the scheduled block of time has expired. This level of discipline acts as a filter that separates the essential from the non-essential, ensuring that your best energy is always applied to the tasks that move the needle. You are training yourself to become a predator of progress who ignores the movement of the grass to stay focused on the target until the moment of the strike. This mental lockdown is not a restriction of your freedom, but the highest application of it, because it allows you to manifest your will without the interference of your own impulses. You are learning to command your mind to stay in the pocket of high-intensity work regardless of the external circumstances. The competitive advantage of extreme focus cannot be overstated in a global economy that is increasingly dominated by shallow thinkers who are unable to produce work of significant value. When you possess the ability to concentrate for 4 hours while others can only manage 20 minutes, you are not just working harder, but you are operating in a different dimension of productivity. Your capacity for clarity allows you to see patterns and connections that remain invisible to those who are constantly checking their phones or reacting to every minor stimulus. This depth of insight is the foundation of innovation and the primary driver of elite status in any field where intellectual or strategic labor is required. While the masses are distracted by the latest outrage or the newest trend, you are quietly building a fortress of competence that is immune to the fluctuations of the marketplace. Focus is the force multiplier that takes your existing skills and amplifies their impact by ensuring they are applied with total intensity and zero waste. It allows you to master complex subjects in a fraction of the time and to execute projects with a level of detail that borders on the superhuman. By becoming a specialist in concentration, you are positioning yourself as a rare and valuable asset in a world that is drowning in a sea of mediocrity and half measures. People will wonder how you achieve so much in such a short period, and the answer will be your absolute refusal to allow your mind to be colonized by the mundane. Your focus is your weapon and your shield, and as you sharpen it, you become increasingly dangerous to those who rely on luck rather than the disciplined application of their mental faculties. This is where the winners are separated from the participants, and where your journey toward total mental dominance begins to yield tangible results in the real world. You must understand that unbreakable focus is a muscle that requires daily exercise and consistent tension to grow and maintain its strength. Do not expect to achieve total mastery overnight, but commit to the incremental expansion of your attention span through deliberate and focused practice. Start by identifying the primary leaks in your concentration and seal them with the same urgency you would use to plug a hole in a sinking ship. Every time you successfully pull your mind back from a distraction, you are performing a mental repetition that makes the next victory easier to achieve. You are building a cognitive architecture that is resilient to the pressures of the modern world and capable of sustained excellence under any conditions. This training has given you the framework to reclaim your mind and to direct it toward the heights of achievement that are reserved for the focused few. Carry this discipline into every hour of your day and treat your attention as your most sacred resource, because it is the primary tool through which you interact with reality. If you lose control of your focus, you lose control of your life. But if you master it, you can win in every situation regardless of the noise surrounding you. The path to elite performance is narrow and requires a level of commitment that most are unwilling to provide, but for you it is the only path that matters. You are now a practitioner of deep concentration, and your mission is to apply this power to your highest ambitions with a ferocity that cannot be broken. This concludes the conditioning for your focus and prepares you for the next level of your psychological evolution, where we will tackle the internal barriers to success. Your mind is now a sharpened instrument ready to be deployed with total precision and unwavering intent on the battlefield of your choosing. Stay locked in and never allow the world to dictate the contents of your consciousness again, for you are the master of your own mental domain. The third phase of your mental overhaul requires a brutal confrontation with the parasitic architecture of your excuses and the hidden patterns of weakness that have governed your failures. Your mind is an expert storyteller that constructs elaborate narratives of comfort designed to shield you from the friction of growth and the weight of absolute responsibility. These stories are not truths, but defense mechanisms triggered by your ego to avoid the perceived pain of effort and the terrifying reality of your own untapped potential. When you tell yourself that the timing is wrong or that you lack the necessary resources, you are not making an objective observation, but rather you are performing a ritual of self-sabotage. This internal dialogue is a virus that consumes your ambition and replaces it with a lukewarm sense of safety that eventually becomes a prison of mediocrity. You must learn to identify these mental escape routes the moment they appear and view them with a level of suspicion that borders on hostility, because they are the primary obstacles to your dominance. Most people live their entire lives within the confines of these lies, never realizing that their perceived limitations are actually self-imposed boundaries designed to keep them small and manageable. We are here to dismantle the machinery of justification and force you to look at your reflection without the filters of self-deception or the cushioning of victimhood. This is not a gentle suggestion, but a hard reset of your psychological operating system that demands the total elimination of the word "try" from your vocabulary. You either execute the mission or you admit that you lack the discipline to see it through, but you will no longer be allowed the luxury of a middle ground. Victory requires a mind that is stripped of all fluff and focused entirely on the cold, hard facts of action and consequence. Procrastination and self-pity are the twin pillars of a weak mind, and they exist solely to rob you of your momentum while making you feel entitled to your own stagnation. Procrastination is a form of arrogance where you assume that your future self will somehow possess a level of discipline that you are unwilling to manifest in the present moment. It is a slow-motion suicide of your goals where you trade your ultimate success for a momentary reprieve from the discomfort of starting a difficult task. Self-pity is even more insidious because it allows you to wallow in your circumstances and seek validation for your suffering instead of seeking solutions for your problems. When you engage in self-pity, you are effectively announcing to the world that you are a victim of your environment and that you have surrendered your agency to forces beyond your control. This mindset is a magnet for failure because it encourages a passive stance toward life where you wait for permission or assistance that will never come from anyone but yourself. Blame shifting is the final stage of this decay where you project your shortcomings onto others to avoid the crushing weight of your own incompetence or laziness. You must realize that every time you point a finger at your boss, your upbringing, or the economy, you are handing over the keys to your life to an external entity. A disciplined mind accepts total ownership of every outcome regardless of the external variables, because ownership is the only path to genuine power and corrective action. If you are responsible for the failure, you are also the only one with the authority to engineer the success, and that realization is the beginning of true mental freedom. You are learning to hunt down your own weaknesses with the same ferocity you would use to track an enemy on the battlefield. To cut off your excuses, you must implement a policy of zero tolerance for any thought that does not directly contribute to the completion of your objective. This begins with the immediate cessation of all internal debate, because the moment you start negotiating with your own laziness, you have already lost the engagement. When the alarm goes off or the deadline approaches, you do not ask yourself how you feel, because your feelings are irrelevant to the requirements of the mission. Feelings are fleeting chemical fluctuations that have no bearing on the objective truth of what needs to be done to secure a win in your current situation. You must treat your mind as a commanding officer and your body as a loyal soldier that follows orders without hesitation or complaint, regardless of the weather or the fatigue. This direct strategy of instant ownership requires you to move before your brain has the chance to manufacture a reason to hesitate or retreat into the familiar warmth of your comfort zone. If you find yourself making an excuse, you must immediately perform a corrective action that is twice as difficult as the original task to punish the impulse and reinforce the discipline. By removing the rewards for weakness, you effectively train your subconscious to stop producing the narratives that lead to failure and start producing the strategies that lead to victory. This is how you build a mind that is hardened against the soft edges of modern convenience and the seductive pull of the path of least resistance. You are forging a psychological armor that is impenetrable to the doubts of others and the whispers of your own internal saboteur, which has held you back for far too long. There is no room for nuance in the pursuit of excellence, because excellence is a binary state that either exists in your actions or it does not exist at all. Strong individuals achieve greatness because they intentionally remove all escape routes and commit themselves to a path where the only options are victory or total exhaustion. When you burn the bridges behind you, the mind is forced to find a way forward because the possibility of retreat has been physically and mentally eliminated from the equation. This creates a state of psychological necessity where your focus is sharpened by the lack of alternatives and your energy is concentrated on the single point of impact. You must act regardless of your feelings, because the elite do not wait for inspiration to strike or for the mood to be perfect before they begin their labor. They understand that action is the parent of motivation and that the momentum generated by doing is the only cure for the paralysis caused by overthinking. By committing to a course of action and refusing to entertain any secondary thoughts, you create a gravitational pull that draws resources and opportunities toward you. People are naturally attracted to those who exhibit a clear sense of direction and a refusal to be swayed by the trivialities of emotion or the opinions of the crowd. This level of commitment is terrifying to the weak because it reminds them of their own lack of resolve, but to you it is the foundational requirement of your new life. You are learning to exist in a state of constant forward motion where obstacles are not seen as reasons to stop, but as problems to be solved with clinical efficiency. This mindset allows you to navigate the most difficult terrain with a sense of purpose that cannot be broken by temporary setbacks or the inevitable friction of high-stakes competition. You are becoming a force of nature that is defined by its persistence and its absolute refusal to accept anything less than total dominance in every endeavor. As this session of mental conditioning comes to a close, you must make a permanent vow to never again allow an excuse to pass your lips or take root in your mind. This is the moment where you leave the old version of yourself behind in the dust of your previous failures and step into the role of a disciplined operator. Every excuse you have ever made was a brick in the wall of your own prison, and today you have begun the work of tearing that wall down with your own hands. Do not look for sympathy or understanding from those who still cling to their comfort stories, because they will only try to pull you back down to their level of safety. Your path is now one of cold objectivity and relentless execution, where your results are the only metric that matters in the final accounting of your worth. Carry this confrontational energy into every interaction and every task, and let it serve as a reminder that you are the master of your own mental domain. The world does not care about your intentions or your potential. It only cares about what you actually produce and the discipline you maintain under pressure. You have been given the blueprint for an unbreakable mind, and now the responsibility for building it lies entirely with you and your willingness to suffer for your goals. This training is over, and the real work begins in the seconds and minutes following this transmission, when the first impulse to be weak arrives, and you crush it without mercy. Stay focused, stay direct, and never give yourself an inch of room to fail, because an inch is all that is required for the rod of weakness to return. You are now a practitioner of mental discipline, and your life will never be the same again if you have the courage to live by the standards we have established. The age of excuses is officially dead, and the era of your absolute ownership has finally begun with the first step you take into the fire. The fourth phase of your evolution demands the abandonment of the most dangerous myth in the realm of performance, which is the reliance on the flickering flame of motivation. Motivation is a biological luxury and a chemical surge that is entirely dependent on your mood, your environment, and your current level of comfort, making it a foundation of sand for any serious endeavor. When you rely on feeling inspired to take action, you are essentially handing the controls of your life over to the volatility of your hormones and the whims of the external world. True mental discipline is the ability to execute your mission with clinical precision, specifically when you feel absolutely no desire to do so and the resistance is at its peak. You must understand that the elite do not wake up every morning filled with fire and passion, but they wake up filled with a sense of duty and a commitment to the systems they have put in place. Motivation is a bonus that may show up once the work has already begun, but it is never the prerequisite for the start of the engagement itself. By disconnecting your actions from your emotional state, you eliminate the most significant point of failure in your psychological architecture and ensure that your progress is never stalled by a bad day. We are here to install a structural integrity within your mind that remains standing long after the initial excitement of a new goal has withered away into the reality of the grind. This is where the amateurs are filtered out because they cannot function without the emotional high of novelty, while the disciplined professional finds their rhythm in the steady cadence of routine. You are learning to view motivation as a fair-weather friend that cannot be trusted with the weight of your ultimate legacy or your daily survival. Building discipline is a mechanical process of repetition that slowly rewires your nervous system to view hard work as your default setting rather than an exceptional event. Every time you follow through on a commitment, when every fiber of your being is screaming for rest, you are performing a mental repetition that hardens your resolve and strengthens your focus. This is not about willpower, which is a finite resource that eventually depletes, but about the creation of systems that automate your success and bypass the need for decision-making. When a task is part of a non-negotiable system, it no longer requires the expenditure of cognitive energy to initiate, because the path has already been cleared by your previous discipline. You must design your life in a way that reduces the friction of starting and increases the cost of quitting until the momentum of your habits becomes an unstoppable force. This systemic approach allows you to maintain a high level of output even when your energy reserves are low because you are operating on a pre-programmed script of excellence. Think of your discipline as an advanced operating system that runs in the background of your consciousness, ensuring that the core functions of your life are executed without error or delay. The more you repeat these disciplined actions, the more they become integrated into your neurological framework until the effort required to skip a session becomes greater than the effort required to complete it. You are essentially building a second nature that is optimized for achievement and resilient to the distractions of the mundane world. This is the structural foundation of a life lived with intent, where your results are the direct product of your daily architecture rather than the accidental outcome of your fluctuating moods. The ultimate key to enduring discipline is an identity shift where you stop trying to achieve a goal and start becoming the person who naturally achieves that goal through their inherent character. If you view yourself as someone who is trying to be disciplined, you will always be in a state of internal conflict as you struggle against your old identity of comfort and avoidance. However, when you shift your internal narrative to define yourself as a disciplined individual, you create a powerful psychological need for consistency between your self-image and your outward actions. This identity acts as a North Star that guides your behavior through the darkest moments of resistance and ensures that you remain aligned with your highest standards regardless of the pressure. When faced with a choice between the easy path and the disciplined path, the person with a hardened identity does not hesitate, because their character has already made the decision for them long ago. You must curate this identity with the same care you would use to build a fortress, protecting it from the influence of people and environments that encourage a return to your former weakness. This mental shift turns the grind of daily discipline into a process of self-validation, where every completed task is a vote for the person you are becoming and a rejection of the person you used to be. You are not just doing the work because you have to, but because it is an essential expression of who you are at the core of your being. This level of psychological integration is what allows top performers to maintain their standards for decades, while others burn out in weeks. By anchoring your discipline to your very identity, you ensure that it is no longer something you do, but something you are, which is the highest form of mental mastery. Practical methods for execution involve the strategic use of small wins to break the paralysis of resistance and generate the initial torque necessary to move the needle. When the mountain feels too steep to climb, you must narrow your focus to the immediate 6 inches in front of your face and refuse to look at the summit until you have taken the next step. This granular approach to discipline prevents the mind from becoming overwhelmed by the total scale of the mission and allows you to build a bridge of small successes across the chasm of your own inertia. You can implement the rule of 5 seconds, where you count down and physically move before your brain has the chance to manufacture a reason to hesitate or negotiate with the task. This bypasses the analytical mind and engages the motor cortex directly, ensuring that action precedes thought and momentum precedes motivation. You must also learn to manage your environment by removing any cues that trigger your old habits of laziness and replacing them with triggers that demand an immediate disciplined response. High-level performers use these tactical tools to navigate the low-energy troughs of their day, ensuring that their baseline of productivity never drops below a certain professional standard. Consistency is built in the shadows when no one is watching and when the rewards are nowhere in sight, which is why these practical techniques are so vital to your long-term survival. By mastering the art of the start, you eliminate the most difficult barrier to discipline and set yourself up for a landslide victory through the sheer accumulation of completed tasks. You are learning to be a technician of your own behavior, applying specific pressures and constraints to your daily routine to guarantee the outcome you desire. This is the practical application of mental discipline, where the theory of excellence is translated into the hard reality of finished work. In the final assessment of a life or a career, consistency will always beat intensity, because intensity is a sprint that ends in exhaustion, while consistency is a marathon that ends in dominance. Most people fail because they attempt to change their entire lives in a single burst of inspired energy, only to collapse when the reality of the work becomes repetitive and unglamorous. You must understand that the most significant breakthroughs are not the result of a single heroic effort, but the compounding effect of thousands of small disciplined choices made over long periods. A single day of extreme effort is useless if it is followed by a week of recovery and regret, but a moderate effort maintained every single day, without fail, is a mathematical certainty for success. This is the law of compounding discipline, where each day of consistency builds upon the previous one, creating a momentum that eventually becomes impossible for any competitor to overcome. You are training yourself to be the person who shows up regardless of the weather, regardless of the news, and regardless of how you feel when you wake up in the morning. This unwavering reliability becomes your greatest competitive advantage and your most powerful tool for winning in every situation, because you are the only one who is still standing when the dust settles. Carrying this grounded and practical mindset into your daily life will ensure that you are no longer a victim of your own volatility, but a master of your own output. This chapter has provided you with the structural blueprints for a life of unbreakable consistency, and now it is your responsibility to lay the bricks one by one every single day. The era of the amateur is over, and your reign as a disciplined professional has begun through the simple and relentless act of showing up and doing the work. You are now equipped with the mental tools to bypass motivation and build a legacy on the solid rock of discipline. The fifth chapter of your transformation focuses on the mastery of your internal narrative during the moments when the external world becomes a storm of high-stakes pressure and physiological stress. Stress is a perceptual poison that warps your reality and distorts your decision-making by narrowing your field of vision until you can only see the immediate threat rather than the strategic landscape. When your heart rate climbs and your system is flooded with stress hormones, your brain naturally shifts into a survival mode that prioritizes speed over accuracy and reaction over contemplation. This cognitive distortion often leads to poor choices because the mind begins to hallucinate consequences that do not exist or ignores vital data points that are hidden in plain sight. You must realize that the internal dialogue you maintain during these critical seconds is the primary factor that will determine whether you emerge as a victor or a casualty. If your thoughts are chaotic and fearful, your actions will inevitably follow that same erratic pattern, leading to a total collapse of your tactical positioning and mental authority. To win in every situation, you must develop the ability to observe the onset of stress with a sense of clinical detachment, as if you are a scientist monitoring a predictable chemical reaction. This level of control allows you to remain the objective pilot of your consciousness even when the instruments are screaming and the altitude is dropping rapidly in the middle of a crisis. You are training to become the eye of the hurricane, where the air is perfectly still despite the wreckage spinning around you at high velocity. By acknowledging that stress is a physical sensation rather than an objective truth, you gain the leverage required to override your primal impulses and maintain a precise grip on your cognitive faculties. The inner dialogue during periods of extreme pressure often degrades into a repetitive cycle of catastrophic thinking and self-doubt that serves only to accelerate your decline. You might find yourself internally shouting at the situation or frantically rehearsing the worst-case scenarios, which consumes the very mental bandwidth you need to solve the problem at hand. To regain control, you must actively redirect this dialogue by replacing the frantic questions of why this is happening with the precise and logical questions of how you will navigate the next 10 seconds. This is a process of cognitive restructuring where you strip the emotion out of your internal speech and replace it with a series of cold and executable commands. Instead of allowing your mind to wander into the future of failure, you must anchor your thoughts to the immediate physical requirements of the present moment with total focus. High performers use a technique called centering, where they identify the one thing they can control and pour all of their mental energy into that single variable to the exclusion of everything else. This redirection of thought acts as a circuit breaker for the stress response, preventing the amygdala from fully hijacking the prefrontal cortex and allowing the rational mind to stay online. You are learning to talk to yourself rather than listening to yourself, which is a fundamental distinction in the realm of high-level psychological performance and mental discipline. By taking command of the internal microphone, you ensure that the only voice you hear is the one that is providing the blueprint for your survival and eventual dominance. This inner voice must be calm, steady, and utterly devoid of the frantic energy that characterizes the untrained mind during a sudden and unexpected shift in the environment. Grounding and stabilizing your consciousness in real time requires a set of reliable psychological anchors that function independently of your environment or the level of chaos you are facing. One of the most effective methods is the practice of sensory indexing, where you force your brain to identify specific objective facts about your surroundings to pull your attention away from the internal panic. By naming 5 things you can see or 4 things you can hear, you are re-engaging the logical centers of the brain and forcing the nervous system to decelerate its frantic processing speed. This grounding technique creates a vital buffer between the stressful stimulus and your eventual response, allowing you to regain the clarity necessary for a high-level strategic pivot. Another powerful tool is the implementation of box breathing, which is a rhythmic breathing pattern used by elite operators to manually override the autonomic nervous system and lower the heart rate. This physical intervention sends a direct signal to the brain that there is no immediate physical threat, which effectively silences the alarm bells and allows for a return to a state of cool and collected analysis. You must practice these techniques in low-stakes environments until they become a part of your subconscious architecture, ready to be deployed the moment the pressure starts to mount. Stabilization is not a passive event, but an active and aggressive reclamation of your own mental space from the encroaching forces of fear and uncertainty. When you can ground yourself in the middle of a disaster, you possess a level of power that is nearly impossible for others to comprehend or counteract in real time. This stability becomes your greatest asset because it allows you to see the gaps in the opposition and the opportunities in the chaos that everyone else is too blind to perceive. Consider the environment of a high-stakes emergency room or the cockpit of a fighter jet experiencing a mechanical failure where every second represents a life or death consequence. In these arenas, the individuals who survive and excel are not those who are immune to stress, but those who have mastered the art of mental control within the heart of the fire. They do not allow their thoughts to spiral into the void, but instead they use a mental checklist that keeps their focus locked onto the immediate tactical steps required to stabilize the situation. If you were to peek into their minds during a crisis, you would find a serene and orderly environment where every thought is dedicated to the pursuit of the most efficient and effective solution. They have trained themselves to see the pressure as a sharpening stone that makes their focus more precise rather than a weight that crushes their ability to act with confidence. You must learn to simulate this level of pressure in your own training by intentionally placing yourself in uncomfortable situations and forcing your mind to remain quiet and analytical. Whether you are facing a hostile confrontation in business or a sudden personal tragedy, the principles of mental control remain identical and universally applicable to any human experience. You are building a mental vault where you can retreat to find clarity and strength regardless of how loud the world outside has become or how high the stakes have risen. This internal sanctuary is where your strategy is born and where your victory is ultimately secured before you ever take a single physical action. By mastering your thoughts in these high-pressure environments, you become an outlier in a world of reactive individuals who are perpetually at the mercy of their own fluctuating emotions and perceptions. As you conclude this chapter, you must understand that controlling your thoughts under stress is a skill that requires constant maintenance and a relentless commitment to psychological discipline. You cannot wait for the crisis to arrive before you decide to become a master of your own internal narrative, because by then it will already be too late to change your trajectory. Carry the calm and precise energy of this session into your daily interactions and watch how your ability to stay grounded changes the way you perceive and interact with the world around you. You are now the master of your internal dialogue and the guardian of your own cognitive clarity, ensuring that no amount of pressure can ever break your focus or derail your mission. The world will continue to be a chaotic and unpredictable place, but you are now equipped with the mental tools to navigate that chaos with a sense of purpose and a clinical level of control. Your thoughts are the architects of your reality, and by keeping them disciplined and directed, you ensure that you will always win in every situation you encounter. This is the end of the 5th phase of your training, and you are now prepared to move into the final stages of your development as a practitioner of absolute mental discipline. Never forget that the strength of your mind is the only true security you possess in an uncertain world, and you must protect that strength with everything you have. Stay calm, stay precise, and remain the master of your own mind regardless of the storms that may gather on the horizon of your life. You have the tools and you have the training, so now you must have the courage to apply them when the pressure is real and the cost of failure is absolute. The 6th phase of your training focuses on the total psychological decoupling of your internal state from your external environment to ensure that your winning mindset remains absolute regardless of your location. Most individuals are products of their surroundings, essentially mirroring the energy and the limitations of the rooms they inhabit, which makes them vulnerable to negative influences and fluctuating conditions. You must realize that while your environment may attempt to influence your thinking, it possesses zero power to control it unless you voluntarily surrender your mental sovereignty to the noise. A truly disciplined mind functions like a self-contained ecosystem that generates its own atmosphere of confidence and clarity independent of the chaos or the defeatism that may surround it. You are learning to exist as a lighthouse in a storm where the crashing waves and the howling winds have no impact on the steady beam of light that defines your purpose and your direction. This level of autonomy is the ultimate strategic advantage because it allows you to remain mentally dominant in hostile territory or during periods of extreme scarcity and institutional failure. We are here to install a psychological filter that allows you to extract the data you need from your environment while blocking out the emotional contagion and the limiting beliefs of those around you. Your mindset is not a reaction to your circumstances, but a deliberate and sustained projection of your will onto the world that forces the environment to eventually conform to your standards. By taking absolute ownership of your mental landscape, you ensure that your performance is never dictated by the weather, the economy, or the opinions of the mediocre masses. You are the architect of your own reality, and your internal environment is the only territory that truly matters in the pursuit of victory. Adapting and maintaining mental dominance in negative or highly competitive situations requires a refined ability to translate every external pressure into a catalyst for your own strategic advancement. When you find yourself in a room filled with hostility or doubt, you must view the situation as a laboratory for your resilience rather than a threat to your stability or your eventual success. The weak will often attempt to pull you down to their level of anxiety through a process of social entrainment, but you must counter this by projecting a state of calm authority that cannot be shaken. This is achieved by anchoring your self-worth to your internal discipline rather than external validation or the temporary scoreboard of a single engagement or business negotiation. In competitive environments, your silence and your composure become weapons that unsettle your opponents because they cannot find a crack in your armor or a reaction to their provocations. You must learn to read the psychological terrain of any room and identify the points of leverage where your unwavering focus can exert the most influence on the final outcome of the mission. Staying mentally dominant means that you are the one setting the pace and the tone of the interaction while others are forced to react to the steady pressure of your disciplined presence. This is not about being the loudest voice, but about being the most grounded individual who refuses to be moved by the petty grievances or the short-term panics of the surrounding crowd. You are a professional who operates with a sense of clinical detachment, seeing every obstacle as a puzzle to be solved and every adversary as an opportunity to test the limits of your own psychological preparation. To remain focused and solution-oriented anywhere, you must develop a portable mental framework that allows you to instantly recalibrate your perspective when the environment shifts or the conditions become unfavorable. This strategy involves the immediate identification of the mission-critical variables in any setting and the total dismissal of the superficial distractions that tend to cloud the judgment of the untrained mind. You must train yourself to look past the clutter and the noise to see the hidden pathways to victory that are always present for those who have the eyes to look for them with intent. Confidence is not a feeling that comes from winning, but a discipline that comes from knowing you are prepared to handle any variable that the world chooses to throw in your path at any given moment. This unshakable confidence is reinforced by a mental script that prioritizes action over observation and solutions over complaints, ensuring that your energy is always moving in a forward direction. If the environment is loud, you become more focused, and if the environment is chaotic, you become more orderly in your internal thought process to counteract the external turbulence around you. You are essentially a thermodynamic system that absorbs the heat of the world and converts it into the cold energy of execution and tactical precision in the pursuit of your highest goals. By maintaining this solution-oriented stance, you become an asset in any environment because you are the one person who is not blinded by the crisis or paralyzed by the complexity of the current situation. Your mindset acts as a gravity well that pulls the situation back into alignment with your objectives, allowing you to lead where others can only follow in a state of confusion and fear. You are the master of the pivot and the king of the recalibration, ensuring that your momentum is never halted by a change in the scenery. Mindset overrides external conditions through the sheer force of psychological persistence and the refusal to accept any narrative that does not align with your ultimate objective or your professional standards. History is filled with examples of individuals who achieved the impossible while surviving in the most horrific conditions because their minds were focused on a reality that transcended their current physical constraints. You must apply this same level of mental intensity to your own life, recognizing that your current obstacles are merely temporary shadows that have no power to stop a mind that is fully committed. When the environment says no, your disciplined mindset says next, and you continue to search for the opening that leads to the next stage of your mission with relentless and quiet efficiency. This is the difference between a person who is a victim of their circumstances and a person who is a master of their destiny regardless of where they start or what they face. You are building a psychological fortress that is immune to the fluctuations of the marketplace, the shifts in political winds, and the personal betrayals that are a natural part of the human experience. By deciding that your success is a non-negotiable certainty, you effectively neutralize the power of the environment to discourage you or to slow your progress toward your eventual victory. The world may provide the stage, but you provide the performance, and you must ensure that your performance is always at an elite level regardless of the size of the crowd or the quality of the theater. This mastery over your internal state is the foundation of true power because it means you can never truly be defeated as long as you maintain control over the space between your own two ears. You are a force of nature that moves through the world with a sense of inevitability that is born from the absolute alignment of your thoughts and your actions in every single moment. As you conclude this training session on the winning mindset, you must commit to being the person who brings the light into the room rather than the person who is defined by the darkness. Take this strategic and resilient energy with you into every encounter and let it serve as the bedrock of your interactions and your daily decisions in all areas of your life. You now understand that you are not a slave to your environment, but a commander of your own consciousness with the power to win in every situation through mental discipline. The external world will continue to test you with negativity and competition, but these are merely the fires that forge the steel of your character into something unbreakable. Carry the weight of your responsibility with pride and the clarity of your vision with absolute certainty, knowing that your mindset is the ultimate weapon in your arsenal for greatness. This chapter has equipped you with the framework for psychological dominance, and now you must live it with a consistency that leaves no room for doubt or for the return of your old reactive patterns. The journey of the disciplined mind is one of constant vigilance and intentional growth, where every environment becomes a training ground for the next level of your elite evolution. You are no longer at the mercy of the crowd because you have found the source of your own power within the quiet sanctuary of your focused and disciplined mind. Stay sharp, stay strategic, and never allow the world to convince you that your potential is limited by anything other than your own willingness to do the work. This marks the completion of your conditioning for environmental dominance and prepares you for the final realization of your potential as a master of mental discipline in every arena. The 7th chapter of your psychological conditioning focuses on the ultimate test of the disciplined operator, which is the ability to maintain absolute internal stillness while the external world dissolves into total chaos. Chaos is a powerful psychological trigger that is designed to elicit a state of panic and irrational behavior by overwhelming your sensory systems with more data than the average mind can process in real time. When uncertainty becomes the only constant, the primitive centers of the brain take over and force individuals into reactive patterns of flight or frantic and disorganized action that almost always lead to failure. This cascading failure of logic is why most people become their own worst enemies during a crisis, as they allow the noise of the disorder to dictate the rhythm of their internal thought process. You must realize that chaos is not a threat to your survival, but a neutral state of high complexity that requires a specific level of mental calibration to navigate with precision and authority. To remain calm in these moments, you must first accept that instability is a natural part of any high-stakes environment, and that your role is not to stop the chaos, but to remain unmoved by its presence. We are here to build a foundation of internal stability that acts as a structural anchor for your consciousness, preventing you from being swept away by the collective anxiety of those around you. This training requires you to view every collapse of order as an opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of a mind that has been hardened through the deliberate practice of emotional regulation and tactical focus. By refusing to mirror the frantic energy of the storm, you become the central point of gravity that eventually pulls the situation back into a state of manageable order. Building internal stability regardless of external disorder starts with the recognition that your inner peace is a fortress that you must defend with lethal intent against the intrusion of frantic thoughts. You must develop a mental boundary that separates your objective analysis of the facts from the emotional turbulence of the event, which allows you to remain a clinical observer in the middle of a disaster. This internal stability is not an accidental trait, but a cultivated discipline that involves the constant monitoring of your own physiological state to detect the earliest signs of the panic response. When you feel the pressure to act immediately without a plan, you must recognize this as a symptom of a mind that is losing its grip on the situation and take corrective action to re-establish your mental dominance. You are training yourself to be comfortable in the unknown and to find your rhythm in the silence that exists beneath the surface of the loud and distracting noise of a collapsing system or a failed operation. Think of your mind as a high-performance gyroscope that maintains its orientation regardless of how the vessel around it is being tossed by the waves of uncertainty and high-intensity conflict. This level of psychological independence ensures that your decisions are always proactive rather than reactive, and that you are never forced into a position where you are merely responding to the moves of your adversaries. By cultivating a state of constant readiness, you remove the element of surprise from the equation and allow yourself to move through the wreckage with a sense of calm inevitability that unnerves those who thrive on chaos. This is where you separate yourself from the masses who require stability to function and join the ranks of the elite who can find their path in the middle of a burning desert. To slow down your perception of a crisis, you must master the art of cognitive pacing, which involves the intentional deceleration of your mental processing to match the requirements of the mission rather than the speed of the panic. When the world seems to be moving too fast, it is usually because your mind has lost its focus on the essential and is trying to process too many irrelevant variables at once, which creates the illusion of overwhelming speed. By narrowing your focus to the immediate task and slowing down your physical movements, you send a signal to your brain that the situation is under control and that there is no need for the frantic deployment of the stress response. Controlling your breathing is the mechanical key to this process, as it allows you to manually override the autonomic nervous system and keep your heart rate within a professional operating range. You must use the technique of rhythmic and deliberate inhalation and exhalation to create a pocket of physiological safety that allows your logic to reassert its dominance over your primal instincts in real time. This practice of tactical breathing not only stabilizes your body, but also clears the fog of war from your mind, allowing you to see the gaps and the opportunities that are hidden within the folds of the chaotic environment. You are learning to move at the speed of precision rather than the speed of desperation, which ensures that every action you take is calculated for maximum impact, with minimum waste of your finite resources. By slowing down, you actually gain a temporal advantage over your competitors because you are seeing the situation in high definition while they are seeing it in a blurred and frantic haze of fear. This is the secret of the master operator who appears to have all the time in the world, even when the clock is ticking down to zero and the stakes have never been higher. Maintaining awareness in the heat of the fire requires a level of situational consciousness that extends beyond your own immediate needs and encompasses the entire strategic landscape of the engagement. You must train your mind to maintain a wide-angle view of the situation even as you execute precise and narrow tasks, to ensure that you are never blindsided by a change in the variables or a shift in the environment. This dual focus allows you to stay grounded in the present while simultaneously calculating the next 3 moves in the sequence, which is the hallmark of a truly disciplined and elite mental performer. When others lose their awareness and become fixated on a single problem, you must be the one who sees the entire board and understands how the different pieces of the chaos are interacting with each other in real time. This superior level of awareness is what allows you to regain control when everyone else is surrendering their agency to the pressure of the moment and the weight of their own unmanaged fear. You become the quiet leader who provides the roadmap for recovery and the steady hand that guides the team through the darkness of the unknown and into the light of a successful resolution. The calm individual is the only one who can truly hear the signals in the noise and identify the critical path to victory that remains invisible to the frantic and the disorganized minds of the uninitiated. Your ability to maintain this level of clarity in the face of absolute disorder is your greatest competitive advantage and your most powerful tool for winning in every situation that requires high-level decision-making. By remaining the most conscious person in the room, you effectively become the master of the room and the ultimate arbiter of the outcome, regardless of the initial conditions of the crisis. As we conclude this chapter on training yourself to stay calm in chaos, you must realize that this discipline is the ultimate expression of your personal power and your professional mastery over your own destiny. Take the stabilizing and powerful energy of this session into the unpredictable moments of your daily life, and let it serve as the foundation for your interactions and your strategic decisions in all arenas. You are no longer a victim of the world's instability, but a commander of your own internal environment with the ability to remain unshakable in the face of any storm that may gather. Carry this intensity with you, and remember that the more chaotic the world becomes, the more important it is for you to remain a frozen lake of logic and a pillar of unwavering mental strength. You have been given the tactical blueprints for psychological stability, and now it is your duty to live them with a consistency that leaves no room for the return of your old reactive patterns or your former weaknesses. The era of panic is over, and the reign of your absolute calm has begun, providing you with the leverage you need to win when others are losing everything to their own lack of discipline. This concludes the 7th phase of your mental overhaul and prepares you for the next level of your development as a master of the inner arena where only the most disciplined survive. Stay steady, stay focused, and never allow the external disorder to penetrate the sanctuary of your own disciplined thought process, because that is where your victory resides. You are now a practitioner of tactical calm, and your journey toward total dominance continues with every breath you take and every decision you make in the heart of the chaos. The world will test your resolve, but you are now armed with the mental armor required to withstand any pressure and emerge victorious in every single situation. The 8th phase of your psychological liberation demands the total destruction of the internal resistance and self-doubt that have acted as the invisible chains holding you back from your ultimate potential. Self-doubt is not an inherent trait, but a learned defensive mechanism constructed by your ego to protect you from the perceived risks of growth and the vulnerability of being measured against a high standard. These limiting beliefs are formed through a slow accumulation of negative experiences and social conditioning that have convinced you that your capabilities are fixed and that safety is found in the shadows of the status quo. Every time you hesitate or allow a fearful thought to go unchallenged, you are reinforcing a neural pathway that validates your own inadequacy and strengthens the walls of your mental prison. You must realize that this internal friction is a hallucination of the ego designed to keep you small and manageable so that you never have to face the terrifying reality of what you are truly capable of achieving. We are here to dismantle the root causes of this resistance by exposing the lies your mind tells you to prevent you from stepping into the arena of high-stakes performance and personal dominance. You must learn to view self-doubt as a foreign entity or a parasitic infection that requires a radical and aggressive intervention of truth and action to be purged from your consciousness. This is the moment where you stop being a victim of your own insecurities and start becoming the master of your internal narrative by identifying the specific origin points of your hesitations. By stripping away the false stories you have inherited or manufactured, you clear the path for a new identity that is built on the foundation of objective capability and unwavering self-belief. The fear of failure and the paralyzing dread of external judgment are the primary architects of the internal resistance that keeps the majority of humanity trapped in a cycle of perpetual preparation without execution. You have been socialized to view a mistake as a terminal defect in your character rather than a vital data point in the process of mastery, which has created a deep-seated aversion to taking the necessary risks for greatness. This fear of what others might think is a survival instinct from a tribal past that no longer serves your modern objectives and only functions to outsource your self-worth to the opinions of those who lack the courage to even try. When you allow the imaginary laughter of critics to dictate your movements, you are essentially giving power to people who have no skin in your game and no interest in your eventual victory. You must realize that failure is not the opposite of success, but a fundamental component of it, and that the only true failure is the refusal to engage with the world because of an unmanaged fear of judgment. High-level performers do not lack fear, but they have developed a psychological immunity to it by realizing that the cost of inaction is far higher than the cost of a temporary setback or a public stumble. You are training yourself to see judgment as noise and failure as a refinery that burns away your weaknesses until only the purest version of your competence remains to be seen by the world. By embracing the possibility of being wrong or being seen as imperfect, you unlock a level of freedom that allows you to move with a lethal level of efficiency and a total lack of self-consciousness. This is the breakthrough where you realize that the world's opinion is a ghost and that your own internal standard is the only judge that has any jurisdiction over your life. To override doubt and act with a sense of absolute certainty, you must implement a protocol of cognitive dominance where you refuse to allow the analytical mind to enter a state of paralysis through overthinking. Certainty is not a feeling that you wait to arrive, but a mental stance that you adopt through the sheer force of your will and the rejection of all secondary and contradictory thoughts. When you are faced with a task that triggers your internal resistance, you must move with a level of speed that bypasses the ego's ability to construct a convincing reason for you to hesitate or retreat into safety. This is the practice of decisive action where you commit to a path and trust in your ability to calibrate your movements in real time as the situation unfolds before you on the field of play. You must learn to treat your doubts as a signal that you are approaching the frontier of your current capacity and that the only way to expand that capacity is to push through the resistance with total intensity. Confidence is built in the gap between your doubt and your action when you choose to act despite the presence of uncertainty and prove to yourself that the world does not end when you step into the unknown. You are building a track record of courage that acts as a psychological armor against future moments of hesitation, ensuring that your default response to pressure is always forward motion. By choosing to believe in your own agency and your own resilience, you create a self-fulfilling prophecy of success that becomes more powerful with every disciplined choice you make. This is not about blind arrogance, but about the strategic application of self-belief as a tool for navigating complex environments and overcoming the friction of reality that stops the weak in their tracks. True confidence is a byproduct of repeated action and is never the result of waiting until you feel ready or until the conditions are perfect for your eventual debut on the stage of life. If you wait until you are no longer afraid, you will be waiting forever because the human nervous system is designed to trigger an alarm whenever you move toward a meaningful and difficult objective. Readiness is a myth that people use to justify their procrastination while they watch their opportunities slip away into the hands of those who were willing to start while they were still shaking. You must understand that competence is the only true cure for self-doubt, and that competence can only be forged in the heat of the fire through the relentless repetition of your foundational skills and your tactical movements. Every time you execute a task under pressure, you are adding a brick to the wall of your self-belief until it becomes an impenetrable fortress that can withstand any external or internal assault. This is the law of evidentiary confidence, where you provide your mind with undeniable proof of your own effectiveness through the results you have produced in the real world. You are training yourself to value the grind over the glory and the process over the applause, because you know that the person who has done the work is the only one who can stand on the summit with a clear conscience. Consistency is the primary driver of this transformation because it forces the mind to accept your new identity as a disciplined operator who does not negotiate with their own laziness or their own fears. By the time you reach the moment of peak performance, you are not trying to be confident, because you are simply being who you have already proven yourself to be through thousands of private victories. This is how you win before you even start the engagement, by knowing that your preparation has already rendered the outcome inevitable through the sheer accumulation of effort. As you conclude this breakthrough session, you must make a final and permanent commitment to the total eradication of excuses and the absolute embrace of your own power to act. Take this intense and liberating energy into every corner of your life, and let it serve as a reminder that the only person who can truly stop you is the version of you that still believes in the lies of self-doubt. You have been given the framework for psychological liberation, and now you must apply it with a consistency that leaves no room for the return of your old limiting beliefs or your former patterns of resistance. The world is waiting for you to step into your full authority, and the only thing standing in your way is your own willingness to let go of the safety of your current identity. Carry the fire of this realization into your daily interactions, and watch how your new level of confidence changes the way the world responds to your presence and your commands. You are no longer a passenger in your own mind, but the elite driver of your own destiny, with the ability to win in every situation through the disciplined destruction of your own internal barriers. This marks the end of the 8th phase of your mental overhaul and prepares you for the final stages of your evolution, where we will integrate all of these principles into a single unified philosophy of excellence. Stay bold, stay aggressive, and never allow the whispers of the ego to drown out the roar of your own ambition as you continue your journey toward total dominance. You have the tools and you have the evidence of your own strength, so now you must have the courage to live as the master you were always meant to become. The era of doubt is officially over, and the reign of your absolute certainty has finally begun with the first step you take into the light of your own potential. The 9th phase of your conditioning moves from the heights of psychological theory to the grounded reality of daily execution, where the war for mental dominance is actually won or lost. You must understand that mental strength is not a static trait that you possess, but a dynamic muscle that is built through the relentless accumulation of small and consistent actions repeated without fail. The elite do not rely on grand gestures of willpower to stay on track, because they have constructed a series of daily systems that make excellence their default setting regardless of their mood. These systems act as a cognitive scaffolding that supports your goals when your internal motivation inevitably falters or the external pressures of the world attempt to derail your progress. By automating the foundational elements of your day, you preserve your finite mental energy for the high-stakes decisions and complex problems that require your total focus and strategic clarity. A mind that is forced to negotiate every minor detail of existence is a mind that is perpetually fatigued and prone to the lure of the path of least resistance at the worst possible time. We are here to architect a daily routine that serves as a non-negotiable contract with yourself, ensuring that your standard of performance never drops below the level of a disciplined professional. You are learning that the quality of your life is the direct reflection of the systems you have implemented to manage your time, your energy, and your attention on a consistent basis. This structural integrity is what allows you to maintain your momentum when others are crashing, because your habits have been engineered to withstand the friction of reality. Success is a mathematical certainty for those who have the discipline to follow a superior system every single day of their lives without excuse. To eliminate decision fatigue, you must ruthlessly audit your morning and evening transitions to remove all unnecessary choices that drain your cognitive reserves before the real work begins. Every minor decision, such as what to wear or what to eat, consumes a portion of your executive function, which is the very resource you need to maintain focus and control your emotions under pressure. By predetermining these trivial variables the night before, you clear a psychological runway for a high-intensity start to your day that is defined by action rather than hesitation. A structured morning routine is not about comfort, but about priming your mind for the state of clinical alertness and tactical readiness required to win in every situation you will face. This ritual should involve a deliberate sequence of physical and mental triggers that signal to your subconscious that the time for rest is over and the era of execution has officially commenced. You are creating a psychological environment where there is no room for debate because the script has already been written and your only responsibility is to follow the protocol with total precision. This systemic approach to the start of your day ensures that you enter the arena with a sense of momentum and self-efficacy that is immune to the distractions of the early morning noise. You are training your brain to move immediately from a state of rest into a state of disciplined production, which hardens your resolve and builds a reservoir of mental toughness for the hours ahead. This is the hallmark of the master operator who understands that victory is prepared in the quiet hours of the morning through the meticulous application of a proven and reliable daily structure. Your routine is your armor, and when you put it on with intention, you become a force that is capable of handling any challenge with a sense of calm and focused authority. The structure of your day must be organized around blocks of deep work and strategic recovery to ensure that your mental output remains at a peak level without succumbing to the law of diminishing returns. You must treat your schedule as a sacred document that protects your highest priorities from the constant encroachment of the urgent but unimportant tasks that plague the modern workspace. This requires the implementation of a single task protocol where you dedicate specific windows of time to the most difficult objectives and refuse to allow any interruptions to penetrate your focus. Between these high-intensity sessions, you must integrate deliberate recovery systems that allow your nervous system to recalibrate and shed the accumulated stress of the morning's efforts. True mental discipline is not about working until you collapse, but about working with such intensity and efficiency that you can afford to rest with the same level of purpose and total intent. By alternating between periods of absolute concentration and intentional decompression, you maintain a sustainable pace that allows for long-term growth and prevents the onset of burnout. This structured rhythm creates a sense of internal stability that makes you more resilient to the unexpected shifts and chaotic demands of a competitive and highly volatile professional environment. You are building a lifestyle that is optimized for sustained excellence rather than fleeting bursts of productivity that leave you drained and vulnerable to the influence of your own weaknesses. This level of organization allows you to navigate the complexities of your mission with a level of clarity that is unattainable for those who live their lives in a state of perpetual reaction and disorder. Your daily system is the engine of your success, and by keeping it finely tuned, you ensure that you are always moving toward your objectives with the maximum amount of torque and zero waste. Daily systems create long-term stability by transforming the difficult and the extraordinary into the routine and the manageable through the power of habit and neural reinforcement. When you follow a disciplined structure for months and years, you are effectively rewriting your identity as someone who is incapable of accepting mediocrity or surrendering to the pull of laziness. This consistency builds a reputation with yourself that is the true foundation of unshakable confidence, because it is based on the undeniable evidence of your own daily actions and results. The cumulative effect of these systems is a massive competitive advantage as you slowly but surely outpace those who rely on talent or luck while lacking the structural integrity to stay the course. You are creating a virtuous cycle where each day of successful execution reinforces your belief in the system, which in turn makes the next day's discipline even easier to maintain and defend. Growth is no longer a matter of chance, but a predictable outcome of the daily architecture you have constructed to support your highest ambitions and your most demanding goals. This stability allows you to handle larger and more complex challenges because your foundational habits are so deeply ingrained that they no longer require any conscious effort to sustain. You have moved from the stage of learning discipline to the stage of being disciplined, where your daily systems are the physical manifestation of your internal philosophy of winning and mastery. This is how you build a legacy of excellence that survives the test of time and the inevitable fluctuations of the external world, which is always looking for a weakness to exploit in your mental armor. By committing to the system, you are committing to the ultimate version of yourself and ensuring that your potential is fully realized through the steady and relentless application of your will to the day. As you conclude this blueprint for daily execution, you must take immediate responsibility for the construction of your own systems and the protection of your mental energy. Take the structured and practical insights from this chapter and apply them tonight to ensure that tomorrow is a masterpiece of disciplined action and strategic clarity in all of your endeavors. You are no longer a victim of your own fluctuating moods or the chaotic demands of others, because you have the tools to build a fortress of routine around your consciousness. Carry this actionable intensity into every hour of your life, and let it serve as the foundation for your journey toward total mental dominance and consistent high-level winning. The world belongs to those who can master their own time and their own attention, and you are now equipped to join the ranks of the elite who live by a superior daily code. This marks the end of the 9th phase of your transformation and prepares you for the final integration of all the principles of mental discipline into a single way of being. Your daily systems are the bridge between your current reality and your highest aspirations, and by crossing that bridge every day, you make your victory an absolute and non-negotiable certainty. Stay structured, stay disciplined, and never allow the allure of the unorganized life to pull you back into the sea of mediocrity where the weak are consumed by their own lack of intent. You are the architect of your day and the master of your destiny, so go forth and execute your system with the ferocity and the precision of a true professional. The era of the accidental winner is over, and the reign of the systematic operator has finally begun with the first disciplined choice you make this evening for the sake of your future self. The final phase of your transformation demands a total transition into the realm of pure execution, where you function with the cold mechanical efficiency of a high-performance machine. Hesitation is the primary killer of greatness because it creates a window for doubt to enter the mind and for the external environment to shift out of your favor. When you pause to overthink a decision, you are essentially leaking power and providing your competitors with the time they need to outmaneuver you and seize the initiative. To win in every situation, you must realize that a decent plan executed with absolute violence and speed will outperform a perfect plan that is delayed by the paralysis of analysis. Overthinking is a luxury you can no longer afford because it acts as a form of internal friction that grinds your progress to a halt and drains your tactical momentum. You are training to become an individual who sees an opening and strikes without the need for an emotional preamble or a secondary debate with the ego. This is the state of the elite operator who has moved beyond the need for conscious deliberation and now operates from a place of intuitive and instantaneous response to reality. We are here to strip away the layers of mental clutter that lead to second-guessing and replace them with a direct neural link between your perception and your action. By eliminating the gap between the thought and the execution, you become a force that is nearly impossible to track or contain because you are always moving at the speed of intent. This level of decisiveness is the ultimate expression of mental discipline and the final requirement for those who seek to dominate their chosen field with total authority. Acting instantly with clarity and purpose requires the implementation of a psychological trigger that shuts down the analytical centers of the brain at the moment of engagement. You must develop a bias toward action that is so strong it overrides your biological instinct to retreat or to wait for more information before committing to a path. This clarity is not found in the contemplation of the task, but in the actual commencement of the work, which immediately simplifies the landscape and reveals the next logical move. High performers understand that the fog of war only clears once you have begun to move through it, which is why they prioritize. Acting instantly with clarity and purpose requires the implementation of a psychological trigger that shuts down the analytical centers of the brain at the moment of engagement. You must develop a bias toward action that is so strong it overrides your biological instinct to retreat or to wait for more information before committing to a path. This clarity is not found in the contemplation of the task, but in the actual commencement of the work, which immediately simplifies the landscape and reveals the next logical move. High performers understand that the fog of war only clears once you have begun to move through it, which is why they prioritize momentum over the illusion of certainty. When you face a moment of choice, you must learn to trust your training and your systems to guide your hands while your mind remains focused on the objective. This is a process of radical simplification where you reduce every complex challenge to a single point of impact and strike that point with everything you have available. By refusing to entertain the possibility of delay, you effectively narrow the world down. To eliminate fear and mental friction, you must adopt a clinical perspective that views every challenge as a technical problem to be solved rather than a threat to your self-worth. Fear is a phantom that feeds on the time you give it to grow, but when you move instantly, the phantom vanishes because it cannot survive in an environment of total activity. You must learn to treat the surge of adrenaline that comes with risk as the fuel for your engine rather than a signal to slow down or reconsider your strategic positioning. This shift in perception turns the pressure of the moment into a source of energy that sharpens your focus and enhances your ability to execute with a high level of technical precision. Mental friction is caused by the internal conflict between your goals and your fears, but when you commit to a path of no hesitation, that conflict is resolved by the act of doing. You are training yourself to be comfortable with the discomfort of the unknown because you know that your ability to act is the only security you will ever truly need in a volatile world. By removing the emotional weight from your actions, you allow yourself to move with a grace and a speed that is unattainable for those who are still struggling with their own internal saboteurs. This is the end of the war with yourself and the beginning of your total alignment with the requirements of the mission, which demands your complete presence and your absolute effort. You are a technician of execution, and your tools are your clarity and your speed, which you apply to every obstacle with the same indifference a saw has for the wood it is cutting. This cold and calculated approach to performance ensures that you are always the one dictating the terms of the engagement and the speed of the eventual resolution. High performers rely on a foundation of rigorous action because they know that emotion is a volatile and unreliable guide for anyone seeking to win at a world-class level. While others are waiting for the right mood or searching for the inspiration to begin their labor, the machine, like operator, has already completed half the task through sheer discipline. You must realize that your best work will often be done on the days when you feel the least motivated, because those are the days when your systems and your habits are doing the heavy lifting for you. By relying on the steady cadence of your execution rather than the peaks and valleys of your emotional state, you create a level of reliability that becomes your most valuable asset. This consistency is what builds empires and wins championships, because it ensures that you are always in the game while others are sidelined by their own fluctuating internal temperatures. You are learning to see yourself as a professional who produces results regardless of the circumstances or the internal weather that may be passing through your mind at any given moment. This detachment from the self allows for a level of objectivity that is required to see the most efficient path through the chaos and to take it without the need for external validation. You are not working for the applause or for the feeling of being right, but for the objective reality of a mission accomplished through the disciplined application of your will. This focus on the result over the process of feeling allows you to outwork and outthink any competitor who is still trapped in the mirror of their own ego and their own unmanaged impulses. You are now a master of the strike and the follow-through, ensuring that every move you make is a calculated step toward the total victory you have already envisioned. As you conclude this final chapter of your mental conditioning, you must step into the world as a fully realized practitioner of unbreakable discipline and machine-like execution. Carry the aggressive and decisive energy of this session into every room you enter and every challenge you face, knowing that you possess the tools to win in every situation. You have dismantled the architecture of your excuses and rebuilt your mind into a fortress of focus and a sanctuary of tactical calm that cannot be penetrated by the world. This is not the end of your training, but the beginning of a life lived at the highest level of performance, where your actions are the only metric that matters to your success. Take the lessons of control and consistency and apply them with a ferocity that leaves no room for the return of your old reactive patterns or your former weaknesses and fears. You are no longer a victim of your biology or your environment, but a commander of your own fate who moves through the world with a sense of clinical inevitability. The era of hesitation is over, and the reign of your absolute dominance has begun with the first step you take from this moment into the field of active engagement. Never allow the noise of the world or the whispers of your own mind to slow your momentum or to cloud the clarity of your mission, which is to win and to keep winning. You have the discipline and you have the systems, so now you must have the courage to live as the machine you have become through this intense psychological evolution. This marks the completion of your mental conditioning and the start of your journey as a master of the inner and outer arenas of life. Go forth and execute with no hesitation and no fear, for you are now a master of mental discipline, and the world is yours to command.